Welcome to the Seeker's Quest podcast. My name's Radha Priti, and I'm here with our family of seekers. So happy to be here with you all this morning. And I have some good news and some bad news. I'll start with the bad news. Veda's still not here today, obviously, and I'm not real sure when he'll be able to return. But the good news is, I was going to do a chapter 1 summary last time, and I didn't get to it. And afterwards, I was thinking, maybe it'd be fun to ask Chaitanya Charan to come and do our chapter 1 summary for us. So I talked to him, and he couldn't come today, but he's going to come on Monday and do our chapter 1 summary. We talked about Chaitanya Charan a little bit last time. I get a lot of the content that I use in this podcast from him. He's like this brilliant, very, very like, he has like an engineer mind. He's very like systematic, structured, and he's like dedicated his life to studying the Gita. So yeah, he'll come and give us the chapter 1 summary on Monday. So be excited for that. And please come. So today we'll start chapter 2. That's where we are. And where we ended in chapter 1 was Arjuna threw down his bow and was like, I'm not doing this, I'm out. He was pretty confused. So we will go, let me share my screen. Okay. So chapter 2, text 1. And here Sanjaya said, seeing Arjuna full of compassion, his mind depressed, his eyes full of tears, Madhusudana, Krishna, spoke the following words. So we remember Sanjaya is Dhritarashtra's assistant. Dhritarashtra is Duryodhana's dad. And so Sanjaya and Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana's dad, are like up in Hastinapur, like modern day Delhi, having a conversation around this. So sometimes Sanjaya will come in as the narrator because he has this capability to be able to see what's going on, like this mystic power. And in that, he's narrating what's happening on the battlefield to Duryodhana's dad, Dhritarashtra, because, he has a vested interest because it's his son. So this second chapter in the Gita, it's the second longest chapter in the Gita. The first longest chapter is the 18th chapter, so the last chapter. But both of these chapters summarize the contents of the Gita, the second chapter and the 18th chapter. So we'll get a lot of good nectar here. So going to this verse, in this verse, Madhu, or Krishna, is referred to as Madhu, and that's significant. We talk a lot about the little nicknames that they give each other, or that they refer to each other as, and kind of what they unveil about that particular character, or even like the relationship dynamic between those characters. So in this, Arjuna calls Krishna Madhu, and Lord Krishna killed the demon Madhu. And now Arjuna wants Krishna to kill the demon of misunderstanding that's overtaken him in the discharge of his duty. So that's like the symbolism there in Krishna calling him that, Arjuna calling him that. So we start to see a little bit that Arjuna starting to lean into Krishna a little bit more. But the point I wanted to kind of point out in this verse is right now Arjuna is kind of coming to this crossroads, and we'll see it in the next few verses. We'll really see it. But this crossroads of, again, he's broken, he's tearful, he's blinded by confusion and dejection. And we're going to see how he handles it. But I thought this is a good place for us to kind of pause and think sometimes when we are coming up against some of these feelings, how do we handle it? What do we turn to? And I think it's very common for us. I know this week, I'll just tell you, being pregnant is like I struggle a lot sometimes with my hormones being all over the place, being totally out of control of my body and emotions. Sometimes I have energy, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I feel nauseous. Sometimes I can eat an entire pizza. It's like so frustrating to me. So Tuesday, I was like, I need a break from myself. I'm just going to sit and watch TV for an hour. That hour turned into like multiple hours, so many hours that I'm embarrassed to even say, to be honest with you. And then afterwards, I was like in a much worse state than I even was at the beginning. So it was definitely not the way to handle it. Usually my like numb out activity of choice is like the fridge. But now I'm so nauseous that like most of the time I'm just like not even interested in numbing out with food. So now I'm turning to Netflix and I'm recognizing that in myself. And the funny thing was Tuesday night I lead this Gita study and I'm watching this Netflix and I'm like, I really don't want to go to this Gita study. I really don't. And I felt so unqualified to lead this Gita study because I've just been numbing out all day to Netflix. Anyway, I go to this Gita study and it's like exactly what I needed to, the verses we were on was like exactly what I needed to hear. And it kind of like snapped me out of my funk. But it's good for us to know what we turn to and to know when we're doing it. And then to also be able to correct without so much judgment. Maybe, we know that these things are temporary band-aids. And if we overdo them, they'll oftentimes make things worse. And we can learn a lot, again, from Arjuna's character and the way he handles these emotions and these feelings and what he turns to. He turns to Krishna. He turns to the message of the Gita. And the Gita is here for us to do the same thing. And by the message of the Gita, we learn to shed all of our material identities and lean into who we really are, eternal parts of Krishna, who is always our benefactor. Because that's really the cause for so much of our distress, right? We get caught in these material identities of who we should be, how we should be acting, these projections that we put on ourselves, these labels that then lead us to these ups and downs of happiness and distress, depending on how well we can measure up to this metric that we've created for ourselves, right? So the Gita really, it zooms out our perspectives and we're able to see a bigger picture and see ourselves in the context of that. And when we practice spiritual life, we become tuned to hear Krishna internally in what we call the super soul manifestation, which is there's 3 different manifestations of God. We'll get into that later in the Gita, but super soul manifestation is sitting within our heart and advising us if we choose to listen to it. And the more that we lean into that and we are open to that and we reach out for that relationship, the more that we'll be able to hear that voice. So despite the darkness around us, we'll spot a ray of light and we'll get inspired to move ahead. But it is true that these things, that it can't be this relationship, it can't be like artificially forced, or you can't say, okay, this is what I believe in. Now I'm going to dedicate all of my time to this. And now I'm going to be this is what I'm going to turn to 100%. It doesn't always work like that, right? Like our spiritual progress is like not linear. It's like up and down and up and down. And so we have to kind of regulate our senses, regulate these things that we reach out for comfort, or, just to feel better, and at the same time, try to like sprinkle more of the spiritual sustenance in our lives with this association, with Sangha, with reading, with chanting, with whatever spiritual practice really resonates with you, leaning into that more, adding more of that into your life. And at the same time, trying to be a little bit more cognizant of the regulation of some of these other things that we reach out to that we know if we overdo will not really lead us to higher levels of consciousness. So that's kind of the process here in the material world. That's what we do. We can't stop functioning. We can't stop functioning in the material world altogether, but we can try to regulate our desires and develop the discipline to have a regular spiritual practice where we're regularly plugging in. And over time, we'll see ourselves reaching less for those short-term gratifications to kind of put a band-aid on maybe what we're experiencing, and more for these long-term holistic healing. Almost like if a heart patient goes goes to the doctor, and what they really need is a change in lifestyle. But that's not really gonna, because their condition is so severe. They need something in the short term to kind of alleviate some of those symptoms so that they can deal with the long term. And so they'll take a pill. But the real solution is this holistic approach of changing their lifestyle. So that's kind of us in this like material condition. We're so consumed with our material identities that just like we can't just flip a switch overnight and say, okay, now I accept and I've realized that I'm spiritual. We have to, it takes time. It's a progression. And in the meantime, we have to engage in the material world, and we acknowledge we'll get some satisfaction out of things, but at the same time, we're kind of cultivating that garden where of these spiritual qualities and assets that hopefully later on will provide us more and more nourishment as we progress and we lean into them. So that's kind of our process. But we can see what Arjuna's doing here is really a guide for us. And we'll get into that even more in the next point. But does anybody want to comment on that or share anything? Can anybody relate to numbing out with Netflix or food binges?
I can definitely relate to this idea of like we're on the spiritual practice and sometimes just gets too hard, and like the feelings and everything just gets so overwhelming that like I will turn to my various addictions. And what I've been trying to consciously do is say, okay, if the pain is not too much, can I make that pain a friend so it can teach me something so that I can then get rid of that pain and it doesn't like recur. Because when we use these coping mechanisms, we don't get rid of anything. And then it just like it builds up like this mountain on top of us. And so for me, I'm just actively trying to like, if the pain is small, can I sit with it? Can I have it teach me a lesson, and can I just like let it go? And like how do I balance that with some of the coping mechanisms? Because if you sit with it and it's like too much, you won't make any progress on it. So I definitely can resonate with that balancing act, and we have to be gentle with ourselves and not be like, I'm going to be this spiritual master and never use any coping mechanisms again. It's like, to me, that's just not realistic.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. I like what you said about using that, if it's a little bit of pain, trying to use it as a lesson or kind of trying to tap into it more and really understand it and sit with it a little bit. Yeah. That's the ideal. That's the goal. Or even maybe if you can't do that in the moment, maybe later you can do it better. You can maybe journal about it or talk to a friend about it and kind of exhaust it in that way.
Yeah, if you don't deal with it in the moment, your body will remember and it'll bring it back up for you again.
Yeah, right.
It's part of the past. So I've been just trying to embrace that, which is challenging because it's suffering.
Yeah, totally, totally. But yeah, that's so true. We'll end up right back on that hamster wheel if we suppress it for too long. So finding some kind of healthy way or an outlet to kind of address it or confront it is so necessary. Thank you.
And I wanted to share a thought, and thank you so much again, Rana, for all of the work that you do to get ready for the class and for our guest speaker on Monday. And I had a thought
Yeah.
about this.
Lisa,
Yeah,
you is there any
yes,
way you could put yourself on video?
I would love to. I'm working on it, everyone. I'm working
Okay,
on it.
okay,
It's
okay,
just
okay.
from coming directly from my practices to
Sure, sure, sure.
I'm working on it. Monday, okay?
I only call
So
you out because I know you so well.
yeah,
Thank
and I
you.
don't mind you sharing anything. Of course, I just
Great.
I will be on camera on Monday.
Wonderful.
I wanted to comment on what you're speaking into because from the viewpoint of community, like when
Mm,
you were speaking about being in your Netflix binge or when I'm in whatever I'm in, the power and the value of community. Because
mm,
when I forget Radha remembers. When you forget, Ava remembers. When Ava forgets, Neil remembers. Someone is always holding sacred space, and from that place, we can reconnect and remember ourselves. And it's, when I'm out there thinking that I'm alone or, oh my God, I'm just in it, I can lean into the power of my community and reconnect to the source. I just wanted to say I thought that was a powerful act on your part.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I'll be honest with you, if I wasn't leading that Gita class, I would have canceled it. I was like so not, and I wanted to cancel it. I was like, I wouldn't have even gone. But then when I went, yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. I would have gone to bed like even more emotional and sad. And like now I'm like, I'm inspired. I'm out of my funk. And yeah, that it's invaluable, this community. I love that you said that. Thank you. Okay, should we go to oh, Baba Mahi, what do you have for us?
Greetings, everyone. I don't usually go on camera. I'm a little camera shy for one, and two, I'm always getting ready for work. So I just happen to look okay right now.
I love
When
that.
um, I really really appreciate what you've gotten started for us as well. And I was thinking about you a lot too. I'm like, I wonder how she's going to feel, as the pregnancy go along and the babies come in, and will she still show up and do the classes? Because I know like it's so much to put into each week with posting the videos and just keeping up. So I would just like to extend myself at some point to be able to help with the Gita classes, if you would like, if you're feeling like you need some extra hands or minds or whatever, definitely keep me in mind.
Aw, thank you. Thank you. I do plan on continuing them because I need them and I can't anticipate needing them any less when baby comes, but it might take, a little bit of time, but I'll definitely continue them. And I so appreciate that. Thank you. So kind. Okay, so let's go to the next point here. This is the second thing we can learn from Arjuna. So first is how he handles himself when he's feeling these emotions, what he does. And the second, we talked about this a little bit before, but how Arjuna's crying is such a courageous act. He's in touch with how he feels and where he is, and he's not afraid to show it. And this really shows us this happiness. It's a state of being, it's not a status symbol. In today's world, we tend to equate possessions and positions to happiness, where we know that even if we have the best sensual pleasures, but we're internally agitated, we won't be happy. Like if somebody you really care about says something harsh to you, and then you go out for like the best meal ever, but you don't even care because you're so sick to your stomach about what you just heard from the person you really care about. When your mind is agitated, it doesn't matter what great pleasures you have in your life, you can't enjoy them. So this happiness requires a calm consciousness. We actually see this too, in studies with people that have a lot of money. There's like a correlation of happiness and money, and it's like goes up until you get to a certain point. Wow, I'm backwards here on TV. It goes up till you get to a certain point, and then it starts to go down. As you accumulate more things and more responsibility and more assets, it agitates your mind. You become less calm in your mind, and maybe even your value system changes, which then also can expedite that. But as long as we conceive of happiness as a status symbol, we suppress our inner agitation and pretend to be happy, like the fast track to happiness. Like, I know I'm feeling this, but if I can just stuff it down or not acknowledge it or act like I have everything together, then I'm happy. Then I get this pretense of happiness, and that makes things better. So that we need this courage to shed this pretense of happiness so that we can actually inquire about real happiness, right? Because as long as we're trying to pretend, as long as we're trying to mask, as long as we're trying to be instead of actually being, we're never going to get to that point where we're asking, where we're inquiring about something more, right? Because we're just so stuck in this, again, this hamster wheel of facades now. We're constantly trying to kind of mask where we are or where we're not, or and how we feel about that. So Arjuna demonstrates this courage at the start of the Gita. He's been following the standard chart to a successful life for a warrior, right? Fight heroically, gain a flourishing kingdom. This is what you do as a warrior, this map of his life. But then he had to fight against his relatives, and he becomes overwhelmed with agony, and he starts to question everything. And he's not afraid to do that, and he's not afraid to feel and experience what he's feeling, and to confront it. And he acknowledges that there's no victory, however glorious would make him feel. And we're going to see in these next few verses, I promise we're getting at these next few verses. I think the 7th text, it's like, what do they call that? Spoiler alert. Spoiler is the 7th text is the first text of like real surrender from Arjuna, where he's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Please instruct me. But it's a process. Like, it takes him some time to get there. But through this wisdom, he understands his essential identity and ultimately his purpose. And he becomes situated in a state of divine harmony that brings him a sense of clarity and calmness, calm-mindedness and confidence. And this can be the same as our journey, if we allow it to be, if we do what Corey was talking about, and use those feelings to really kind of just triggers to look inside deeper, to say what's actually going on here, and where am I, and what can I do about it, from a place of love and compassion, almost like, you would treat your child, not from a place of judgment and harshness and I should be somewhere else. Or so that's kind of our journey in this, and what we can learn from it is kind of accepting where we are, owning it, confronting it, and then maybe getting to the point where we're going to see Arjuna gets, is inquiring about something deeper, admitting when you're like out of answers, and you need to look elsewhere. You need to expand your vision, or hold something else in, or change something in the internal tapestry to get you to the next place. So, and this is interesting to compare to how Duryodhana handled his fears, right? When he looked across, and he was like a little bit intimidated. We remember that when he looked across the battlefield, and he's like, sees the Pandavas, and he's like, whoa, they look way more confident than I thought. He's feeling a little bit intimidated. What does he do? He tries to cover it up and manipulate and control other people to, he kind of goads Drona there, and he's kind of being his normal political self, trying to control the situation and get things to fall in his way, so that then he feels like he won't be fearful anymore, right? So he can get his fear to go away and hide, almost like another Band-Aid. So the things we can learn from these two characters, and how we can handle these challenges, not the same challenges, obviously, but challenges in our life when they come up. Just digging a little bit more deeper into the surface here on that. What do you guys think? And that's okay. If we don't have anything, we can move on to the next one. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So now we are at 2.2. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, how have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the values of life. They lead not to higher planets, but to infamy." So this is a rhetorical question. And Krishna is saying, impurity is unbecoming to you. He's saying, in this world, it will lead to infamy, like you will be completely mocked. Beyond this world, you won't go to heaven. And when he talks about the value of life here, he says, this is not befitting of a man who knows the value of life. The value of life refers to having a civilization based on spiritual realization, knowing your true identity as a spirit soul. And in that time, spiritual civilizations, they were based on this varnashram system, which is, we've talked about this a little bit, but it's the purpose of the varnashram system is to regulate the sense desires so that it does provide a nice, stable foundation for spiritual life. And everybody had their, and in this, everybody had their role in society based on their psychological nature. And in that, Arjuna is a warrior. And having these kind of divisions like this and everybody kind of working towards the same goal in harmony, it's almost like different parts of the body working together as a whole. So, you know, Arjuna was a Kshatriya, so he's like the arms. Then you had the Brahmanas, like the advisors, like the spiritual advisors. They were like the head. And you know, you had a couple different other classes. We'll get into this more later in the Gita because we actually studied the system in the Gita. But the whole thing, the whole objective of it is you have these different body parts working together collectively to contribute to society and to keep society in order and centered around spiritual life. And so that's when he says the value of life. This is what he's saying here. He's saying it's your duty. You're a Kshatriya. This is your duty, and kind of rejecting that. It's not befitting of someone who understands how this works in society and functions and your important role. You know, everybody's role was important to contribute to the collective, and now you're neglecting that, and that's cowardly. That's so Krishna's kind of calling him out like that. And we'll go to the next one. Feel free to interject if anybody wants to say anything before we go to the next one. So now we're at 2.3. O son of Partha, do not yield to this degrading impotence. It does not become you. Give up such petty weakness of heart and arise, O chastiser of the enemy. Here, Krishna is kind of verbally slapping Arjuna. He's implying that he's small-minded, excessive limitation over small things, and that he's impotent, like he's less strong, he's less masculine, these kinds of things. He's telling him, like, man up. And obviously Krishna has much more profound things to share with him about spiritual realization, but he's seeing that Krishna's not quite ready for that level of philosophical guidance. So he's using these strong words to emotionally jolt Arjuna to sticking to his duties, because he's kind of seeing that that's where he is, which is another good lesson for us. And this is like another really important spiritual principle, is that we don't expect people to be where they aren't. And we don't preach to people above their level of realization, you know, like expecting like a 1-year-old to clean their room by themselves, or an elementary school student to do college algebra. Like if our goal is to really be effective with people, then we try to meet them where they're at. And in that, we are actually doing a service. Of course, if our advice is if nobody even asks for our advice, then maybe better just to not even share it. But if somebody's asking for your advice and you're really in a mood of trying to serve them and trying to help them, we try to be sensitive to where other people are, and to kind of tailor to that level of realization. And sometimes somebody may be way more realized than you, and you're like, this is beyond my capacity, because I'm not so learned, and you know, better that you maybe consult this person to talk to you about this, because I'm not quite there yet. But just some things, you know, if we're really trying in that mood of service, really trying to help somebody, to kind of to cultivate a level of awareness around that even when we're trying to help somebody, sometimes we get into this like ego, like, let me show you how much I know, which is like the opposite of service, right? That's so me-centered. So better to really, really try to listen and understand where somebody is, and then meet them there, and kind of in that mood of surrendered service, without letting your ego kind of take over. What do you think of that, Lisa?
I'm over here chuckling to myself because anyone who's had or works with a teacher knows this moment when teacher's like, what are you talking about? And really call on your understanding, whatever level it may be, and to stand on it. And it's like, what are you doing? You actually know the truth. And as you were reading the previous verse, I was thinking about this quote from the Course in Miracles that says, peace and understanding go hand in hand. They are inextricably bound and cannot be found apart. And so when we're willing to lean into our understanding of the teachings, of who we are, of our lived experience in life, then we have peace. It's only when we fall and act as though we don't know, or we're not standing in principle, let's say, that then we become distracted and are caught off guard and can react like wounded beings.
Mhm. That's really
That's
beautiful. I
my
like that.
experience.
Thank you for sharing. Peace and understanding go hand in hand. Yeah, I like it. This is a good bumper sticker. Thank you.
It's a good bumper sticker.
Okay, anyone else before we move on? Okay, 2-4. Here we go. Arjuna said, O killer of enemies, O killer of Madhu, how can I counter attack with arrows in battle men like Bhishma and Drona, who are worthy of my worship? Here, Arjuna is turning the argument around. He's saying, I should be offering respect, but now I'm shooting arrows. Let me just get out of this screen. Sorry. So the Gita is getting deeper from an emotional dilemma where this doesn't feel good or right, to an ethical dilemma where I don't think this is the right thing to do or the good thing to do. And the ethical dilemma will be emphasized in subsequent verses. But also here, Arjuna calls Krishna by two names. We keep talking about these names, but they just reveal so much insight into what's going on here. Arjuna calls Krishna two names that translate as killer of the demon or killer of the enemy. And we don't have that full appreciation because we don't read the Sanskrit, but those would be, he calls them two names, and that's what they translate to indicate that Krishna is habituated to and even celebrated for killing enemies and demons. But suppose Krishna had to fight against his own guru or his grandfather. Would he hesitate? So Arjuna is, again, he kind of wants to poke at that a little bit. Like, yeah, okay, it's one thing to kill demons and enemies, but what if you're related to them, or what if they're your guru? What is that? And in here, this is something else we can probably all relate to in Arjuna's experience. It's hurtful when others misunderstand us. That's hurtful. But it's even more hurtful when they misunderstand us and ascribe a lower motive to us, when we are actually concerned about something higher. Right? So Krishna's telling Arjuna, you're being weak. And Arjuna's like, no, this is the right thing to do. My motive is much higher than just me being petty of heart. This is actually the ethical right thing to do. So he's trying to communicate that to his friend so that he can be understood. And Krishna never actually misunderstood Arjuna. He just wanted to remind Arjuna how his actions would be seen by others. But Arjuna wants it to be clear that his stance is not due to an emotional weakness, but an ethical dilemma. So we see this relationship between friends, which is so relatable, of being misunderstood, trying to clarify, and we'll see where this gets them. 2-5. Sorry, I'm like having a little bit of trouble pulling up my stuff today for some reason. 2.5. It would be better to live in this world by begging than to live at the cost of the lives of great souls who are my teachers. Even though desiring worldly gain, they are superiors. If they are killed, everything we enjoy will be tainted with blood. So Arjuna's taking the case further, talking about his respectable elders. And again, in the past, societies were structured, stratified. A warrior is a protector and a beggar is a mendicant. And though it is humiliating to be a mendicant, to be a beggar, like we talked about, Arjuna's, for Arjuna, it's better than living at the cost of the elders dying. So that's pretty severe here that Arjuna is at that place. We talked about that a little bit in the last episode. But another point here that I wanted to highlight is Arjuna is he's really conscious of the fact that, he's going to have to fight his relatives. And we know this in our everyday lives, what brings meaning to our lives is the affection that we receive and the achievements that we accumulate. Like we can't argue with this. We get meaning out of that. Whenever we lose affection or we don't achieve something, we think, what's the actual meaning? What am I doing here? Or what am I worth? Or, we start having all these kind of like negative feelings. And Arjuna is upset because both Bhishma, his emotional connection, Bhishma is his grandfather. He's such love for Bhishma. He's on the other side. And Drona, who's his professional connection, Drona was his teacher. They're on the other side and he has to kill them. And it's said that achievements can define us and affection inspires us. So if we really think about this, we could probably see in our psychology that we've bought into this. If we achieve something, if we win something, or we become, we feel like that we kind of accept that as our identity. Okay, now I'm good at this. I'm a rower, or I'm a football player, or I'm a student, whatever it is that I am, that kind of becomes our identity. And then when we start getting accolades for it and people start giving us attention for it, and we develop friends around that, then that inspires us to settle even more into that identity, right? But the other side of this is that achievement can confine us as it makes us limit our identity, right? So we say, okay, I happen to be a really good ballet dancer, so that's what I am, and I'm going to dedicate my whole life to that. And I'm gonna, what do? They starve themselves so that they can be a good ballet dancer, and it becomes their whole identity. And it then they're kind of confined in this box of what I am and what I'm not. I do this because I am this. I don't do this because I am not that. And that can be limiting. It can also keep us safe sometimes if we need it, but it can also be limiting. But affection can exhaust us, right? As we give everything that we have to please. I don't know who's been there, but I've absolutely been there. And in that, completely kind of losing any sense of identity. And just trying to please, just trying to be. So meaning is made possible by affection and achievement. And Arjuna was so grateful for those meaning makers in his life that he couldn't kill them. And this also happens to us. We can't confront our attachments, our insecurities, and we want to run away from this situation. So whenever something challenges us, instead of facing it, we want to take flight. But here, Krishna is going to expand both Arjuna and our perceptions by giving us something even more sustaining to hold on to, something even more eternal. And this will put everything into perspective for all of us. And again, it's not that affection achievement doesn't have some role in our life, but it's just putting it in the correct context, putting it in the proper perspective, and understanding, yeah, we have these functional identities, but they are not us. We are much more than that. And in that way, we kind of see the purpose of the functional identities and what they actually serve, or what we could actually make them serve. Right? Like if you're a good baker, we can bake and we can offer it to the divine. If you're a good writer, you can write and you can offer. If you're a good teacher, you know, these things that can become offerings that can start to purify us instead of maybe bind us in a certain identity or confine us. That's the language used, right? So it's all about perspective. As we grow older, our perspectives are always expanding. We see that as we like graduate high school and we realize maybe our high school friends weren't as important or the center of the universe as we once thought. Or the same things, maybe once we have kids, it puts certain things in perspective, like things that you thought you cared about so much that you're like, I can't believe I was so wrapped up around that. So this wisdom that we're going to get from the Gita, it's just another layer of expansion of consciousness, another zoomed out level or layer of the onion, right? As we see, it doesn't mean that these things, you know, have zero importance in our life, but it's putting them in the proper context to maybe support what's really important in our life, right? Like when you have, like you always like your job's, you know, maybe it's about achievement, prestige for you, making money so that you can have fun, but then you have kids and your job becomes about supporting your family. And that's so much more purposeful and gives you so much more, gives you so much more, yeah, like purpose and meaning in your life. It's kind of the same thing as we start to realize some of the spiritual knowledge is the things in our life we see the real purpose of them, what makes them really meaningful is that they support this higher purpose, this higher meaning. And in that, we start to get so much more genuine joy and appreciation and connection to these things without them binding us into boxes of identities and labels that we were maybe clinging on to before to feel some kind of purpose or happiness. So that was a long one. I want to hear from you guys what you think.
I feel like this is a great metaphor for the individuation that we have to go through as people, because we grow up with this. We want to respect our parents. We want to please our parents. We want, to do as, they say based on, their wisdom. But at some point we have to decide, hey, we live in a different world than they lived in. We're different people than they are. And we have to sort of make these judgments of, do I listen to them or do I listen to what's in my heart? And how do we balance that? And I feel like that's kind of what Arjun is going through. And it's not, it's not obvious always what to do. And there's attachments that kind of hold us up from maybe making the most wise decisions, where we get more attached to our elders than maybe we should be.
Yeah, yeah, and or attached to like this concept of being the good daughter or the good, like I have to do what they want so that I'm loved and accepted and appreciated.
Right. And as we grow up, we have to become leaders, and it's like that we can't be that golden child anymore. We have to kind of rebel almost in this, like, I don't know, a constructive way.
Yeah, well, I think what happens maybe is that as we progress in our consciousness and our understanding of these realizations and what it actually means to be a spiritual person and live a spiritual life, and maybe we start to imbibe some of these qualities, we really just can kind of start to maybe change the dynamics of some of these relationships to where maybe the relationships were based off of I do what, or I'm accepted if I'm doing what you feel is socially acceptable, to like I'm accepted because I love and accept you as you are, and I am more, and you can show up more wholly for other people because you've begun to love and accept yourself for who you really are without trying to be something artificial to please somebody else. Right. And that's like takes a little bit of time and could be a little bit uncomfortable, but it's I don't know that we even have to think of it so much as like a rebellion as much as just like a change into something that fits better, and then maybe like an awkward period while others get used to it, but with the final goal of being impacting other people in a positive way and inspiring other people in an inspiring way to live more authentically and to love more authentically. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's almost like the rebellion is like a transition phase where you go from, okay, I do exactly what my parents say to like, oh, wait, okay, wait, I got to figure out and make my own way. When do I listen to them? When do I listen to me? And eventually you want to get to that wise point where you're just operating from a place of wisdom and that rebellion's not even there.
Yeah, I like that. That's nice. Yeah, that's a good synthesis there that you just presented, that middle stage. Yeah, because it does feel like that a little, and it is a little bit awkward for everybody. And maybe there's some like distance in relationships that feels uncomfortable or sad but yeah, knowing that if you stay course and you stay true and you stay sincere, that you get to that place eventually, and the other relationships will also, or they won't, and then maybe they were kind of superficial anyway. But does anyone else have anything to add to that or say about that? Quiet crew today. Okay. Well, that's all that I had for you all today. I am, like I said, I'm starting to get the Seeker's Quest Instagram. I'm trying to get it active again. So if you haven't joined us on Instagram, please join us. And on our Instagram, we have a link tree to find the podcast episodes on all podcast platforms and YouTube. And then also to join our retreat that we're having in New Vrindavan next month, October 11th through the 13th. So there's still, excuse me, there's still spots if you want to come. Love to have you. Have our Sangha. We'll be doing the same kind of stuff, adding in kirtan, some other fun connecting activities, bonfire, delicious prasadam, which is sanctified food that's been offered to divinity, and then we honor as mercy from divinity. So yeah.
Well, I do have one question
Yeah.
if we just have a moment. And so my question is about the super soul manifestation. You said you were going to say a little bit more about that concept. Could you now?
Sure. So there's three manifestations of God. We have the super soul manifestation, which is in the heart. We have the Bhagavan, which is like the form of God. And then this concept that God is everywhere. And we can kind of compare this to the sun. The sun rays are kind of like feeling God's presence everywhere. Then the sun disk is this super soul God in the heart. And then this form of God, which we call Krishna. Here, Krishna means all attractive, but there's different names for gods in different religions. We God is no religion has a monopoly on God. So God is God. But the form of God that we connect with on a personal level, that's Bhagavan. And in Bhakti Yoga, that's the relationship that we really focus on, with understanding that if we really focus on that relationship, then we inherently develop all of the other relationships naturally. So those are the three conceptions, but God in the heart is very real for all of us that we can experience. And that was in that particular point. Yeah, it was kind of referring to that, and that kind of inner voice, that kind of inner knowing. And what happens is when we're connected with our senses more, we have our mind, we have our mind, and we have our intelligence, and we have our soul. And our soul can influence our mind and intelligence, but it can also happen the other way around. So if we're engaged in more activities to satisfy our sense gratifications, or to maybe like things on lower level of consciousness, our soul gets covered. And in that, we're not hearing the Paramatma, the God in our heart as well. But if we do things to constantly uncover our soul, if we really lean into spiritual wisdom in these texts, and we engage in more spiritual activities, we can start to uncover that covering that's on top of our soul, and the light, it can resonate out more and influence our mind and our intelligence and have a bigger impact on those things, because it's like a clear pathway. So So that's I think the point I was making there is that if instead of turning to things like band-aids to make ourselves feel better, like I got so lost in this drama, I'm telling you, on Netflix, it was terrible. I felt like I was living these characters' lives, which were not, I mean, they were not very elevated lives. We cover our soul, you know, and that becomes our narrative. That's what drives our intelligence and our choices and our decisions. And sometimes we even get confused. We think that intuition is coming from God, but actually we're more plugged in to kind of this drama that's really where the voice is coming from. So what I was saying is what Arjuna is doing is turning to Krishna, and in that he's illuminating his soul. He's kind of clearing that pathway from the soul to the mind to the intelligence so that it can infiltrate it, so that he's more in touch with it and his actions can reflect that relationship. So it's not necessarily like you can't just say, oh, God's in my heart, and so what I'm doing is connected. Not really. God is in your heart, but to the degree that you're covered, to the degree that you're materially entangled, materially attached, materially disturbed or distracted, that's actually what's guiding your intelligence. And to the degree that we can start to peel that back by, again, regulating those desires and sprinkling in more spiritual wisdom, it's to the degree that we can really connect with that Paramatma in the heart. Does that make sense?
Thank you so much. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you all. Anything else before we adjourn here? And what I just described will actually get to in the Gita, that very, like, I think I even have better analogies in my notes for it to make it a little more systematic and clear. So that'll be fun. Thank
Thank
you
you
all.
so much. Thank you for
Thank
today.
you.
Thank
Yeah.
you, everyone.
Thank you. And please, everybody, come on Monday for Chaitanya Charan. It'll be really fun and special. And you'll see like what a wealth of knowledge he is. And he's
so
like one of
excited.
those elevated, yeah, great. He's one of those like elevated persons that you just learn from being with and interacting with, because he, again, really imbibes these things in just the way that he like presents himself and carries himself, really. So it's wonderful association.
He does such a great job of pulling together like the ancient scripture and like the modern world, and like how do we practically like put all of this together? He's so amazing. He's one of my favorites. So I'm so excited for Monday. Looking forward to it.
Good. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all. See you Monday. Haribol.
Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll see you
Thank you.
Monday.
See you Monday.